one last thing, it's not really in the papers. I'm a bit surprised by that, but there's no pictures of Prince Harry, who spoke out about it earlier on this evening, very much condemning Donald Trump's comments. How much of an impact do you think that will be? How significant?
The thing is, I think it will be very significant for the bereaved, because they do see Harry as one of theirs, and they will respect and be grateful for his intervention. But I mean, and I feel for Harry on this. He's got so many forces ranged against him. Huge segments of the British media are just shutting him out now because they've gone Team Charles. Then his kind of traditional supporters will be people like us at The Guardian, and we're not big royalists, so we don't really go there.
It's always been a bit beyond, because, he founded the Invictus Games back in 2014. It's obviously something that he's always felt very, very strongly.
Oh, yeah. I certainly wouldn't say there was anything inauthentic about his feelings about it. I just don't think he's going to get he's not going to get the kind of showcase that he would ordinarily have got.
He may not do if he does it once, but my point would be, this is the Harry that we love. This is the Harry that we miss. And if he decides this is what he wants his public life persona to be about, then he will be re-embraced by the British public, I have no doubt. If he determines that this is the sort of thing he wants to take a stand on, rather than some of the other activity, promoting some social media activity that their new venture is off on the West Coast. If he decides this is what that he's about, I think he will have a very profound impact for himself as well as for the rest of us.
He can't just go to war with Trump as his new public persona.
No, I mean, if he can. It doesn't have to be at war with Trump in order to speak up for veterans, their issues, their interests, with someone who has real standing in this. He had 2 tours, and the people of that community speak much more highly of him than they did about, even before all the issues, Prince Andrew.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we did a lot of interviews throughout the day with veterans, and obviously they were all quite touched, I think, by the fact that Prince Harry had spoken out. Well, it's certainly a story that's not going to go away anytime soon. Let's take a look at...
Did you listen to this Sky News press preview? There's a fascinating discussion unfolding about the conspicuous absence of prominent press coverage on Prince Harry's impassioned defence of veterans, and honestly, the silence speaks volumes. But of course, the British media wouldn't front page this, would they? Because that would remind the public of the outspoken hero with a backbone that Harry is, and it would probably embarrass Prince William and King Charles, who holds the title of Commander of the Armed Forces, but has remained conspicuously silent on the matter. As one commentator astutely observed, Harry's statement will be very significant for the bereaved because they do see Harry as one of theirs, and they will respect and be grateful for his intervention. I feel for Harry on this. He has so many forces ranged against him. Huge segments of the media are shutting him out now because they've gone Team Charles. The host's observation was equally telling. We did a lot of interviews with the veterans all throughout the day, and they were quite touched that he had spoken out. So there you have it. The veterans themselves are moved, grateful even. But the press? They're too busy protecting the establishment narrative to give Harry's advocacy the coverage it deserves. The deafening silence. Why Harry's defence of veterans vanished from headlines. In a remarkable segment on Sky News Press Preview, commentators dissected something rather extraordinary, or rather the absence of something extraordinary. Prince Harry's powerful statement defending veterans had somehow failed to materialise as front-page news across Britain's major publications. The discussion laid bare what many have suspected for years, that the British media operates less as impartial observers and more as strategic players in a carefully orchestrated palace narrative. As one panellist astutely observed, Harry's intervention carries immense weight with bereaved military families who see him as one of theirs, someone who genuinely understands their pain and isn't afraid to speak truth to power. Yet this very authenticity appears to be precisely why his words were relegated to the media wilderness. The host's revelation that veterans interviewed throughout the day were quite touched, that Harry had spoken out only amplifies the glaring disconnect between what matters to those who've actually served and what the establishment press deems worthy of coverage. What emerges from this discussion is an uncomfortable reality. Huge segments of the media are shutting him out now because they've gone Team Charles, which means stories that might remind the public of Harry's courage and moral backbone, qualities that inevitably draw unflattering comparisons to his brother William and father Charles, who, as commander of the armed forces, has remained conspicuously silent. Simply don't make the cut. Why Prince Harry's veterans' advocacy matters more than the media wants you to know. Prince Harry's credibility within military circles isn't something he bought with a title. It's something he earned in the deserts of Afghanistan, sleeping in the same tents, facing the same dangers, breathing the same dust as the servicemen and women beside him. That's why when he speaks on armed forces issues, veterans actually listen, because he's been there, done that, got the sand in places sand shouldn't be. His outspoken stance on military matters, from mental health support to holding institutions accountable for failing those who served, has positioned him as one of the few high-profile figures who'll actually stick his neck out when it's easier to stay silent. Within veteran communities, he's not seen as some distant royal doing charity work for the optics. He's viewed as someone who understands their struggles firsthand, who's navigated his own demons after service, and who isn't afraid to call out the establishment when they let down the people who've sacrificed everything. That's the kind of respect you can't manufacture with press releases or carefully staged photo ops. It's built on consistency, authenticity, and the willingness to be unpopular with the powers that be, if it means standing up for the troops. Royal silence speaks volumes as Harry champions veterans. The deafening quiet from Buckingham Palace grows more conspicuous with each passing day. King Charles, who proudly holds the title of Commander of the Armed Forces, has offered not a syllable on the plight of bereaved military families, families who are demanding answers, demanding accountability, demanding the basic dignity of truth. Prince William, too, remains conspicuously absent from this conversation, his silence echoing through the corridors of power like an unanswered question. Their collective reluctance to wade into these troubled waters speaks volumes about the modern monarchy's carefully calibrated approach to controversy, where self-preservation often trumps moral leadership. While Harry stands shoulder to shoulder with those who've sacrificed everything, his father and brother remain safely ensconced behind palace walls, their silence serving as a stark reminder of the chasm between those who perform duty and those who actually understand it. One can't help but wonder, when the commander of the armed forces won't command respect for the fallen, what message does that send to those still serving? The deafening silence. How British media buried Harry's stand for veterans. The absence of front-page coverage for Prince Harry's powerful defence of bereaved military families wasn't an oversight. It was editorial policy in action. British media outlets have developed remarkably selective coverage patterns when it comes to the Duke of Sussex, carefully curating what reaches the public consciousness and what gets relegated to the margins or ignored entirely. The shift toward Team Charles narrative alignment has fundamentally altered how newsrooms approach stories involving Harry, with editorial decisions increasingly reflecting an institutional preference for protecting the monarchy's current hierarchy rather than pursuing newsworthy content. This deliberate exclusion of Harry from mainstream outlets becomes glaringly obvious in moments like these, When a royal who actually served in combat zones speaks out for veterans who've lost loved ones to contaminated water, the story should write itself. Yet it mysteriously fails to appear where millions would see it. The truth is that Harry's intervention reminds the British public of something deeply inconvenient for the establishment narrative. That he remains the outspoken hero with a backbone, the one willing to put himself on the line for those who served, while his father, the commander of the armed forces, and his brother maintain a conspicuous silence that speaks volumes about their priorities. Harry's statement resonates with those who served. The veterans interviewed throughout the day made one thing abundantly clear. Harry's intervention mattered profoundly to them. There was gratitude in their voices, a palpable sense that, finally, someone with a platform was speaking up for them, someone who understood their world from the inside. They expressed feeling heard, genuinely heard, perhaps for the first time in this entire ordeal, and it was Harry who had given them that. These are people who've served, who've sacrificed, and who now see one of their own standing up when it would have been far easier for him to stay silent. The appreciation ran deep, not just for the words themselves, but for what those words represented. That they weren't forgotten, that their pain and their families' suffering hadn't been swept under the rug, and that someone with Harry's unique position, a veteran himself, someone who knows what it means to wear the uniform, was willing to put his neck on the line for them. That kind of solidarity, that public intervention from someone the forces community considers one of theirs, means everything when you felt abandoned by the very institutions that should protect you. Prince Harry's voice, a beacon for bereaved military families, for the families left behind, those who've lost sons, daughters, husbands, wives to service. Harry's statement carries a weight that palace protocols and distant condolences simply cannot match. These bereaved relatives see Harry as one of their own, a veteran who walked the same dust, felt the same fear, carried the same burden. That shared experience transforms his words from mere sympathy into genuine solidarity. The respect and validation his support provides cannot be overstated. When someone who has been there, who understands the cost in blood and sleepless nights, stands up and speaks out, it tells grieving families that their loss matters, that their loved one's sacrifice is seen. The veterans interviewed throughout the day weren't just pleased, they were touched, moved by the simple act of Harry using his voice when silence from others has been deafening. In a landscape where so many forces are ranged against him, where vast segments of the media have chosen their allegiance and gone Team Charles, Harry's willingness to stand with the bereaved is precisely the kind of backbone that reminds people why they respected him in the first place. The mounting pressures against Prince Harry. The forces arrayed against Prince Harry have grown formidable, creating a landscape where even his most meaningful interventions struggle to break through. His statement defending veterans, those who see him as one of their own and who are genuinely touched by his words, has been met with a deafening silence from large swathes of the British press, a silence that speaks volumes about the current media environment. Huge segments of the media have essentially shut him out, having chosen their allegiance to Team Charles, leaving Harry's voice increasingly marginalised despite the significance of his message. This hostile media landscape means that the outspoken hero with a backbone, the man who continues to stand up for causes that matter, finds himself systematically excluded from the traditional press coverage that once amplified royal statements as a matter of course. The isolation is strategic, deliberate, and remarkably effective. When Harry speaks truth to power or champions the vulnerable, the megaphone that would typically broadcast such royal advocacy has been switched off, ensuring his narrative never reaches the audience it deserves. Prince Harry's veteran advocacy highlights critical questions about media independence. The apparent reluctance of British press outlets to prominently feature Prince Harry's defence of veterans raises uncomfortable questions about media independence and editorial integrity in an era where royal allegiances appear to influence coverage decisions. The suggestion that huge segments of the media are shutting him out now because they've gone Team Charles points to a troubling dynamic where journalistic priorities may be shaped by palace relationships rather than newsworthiness or public interest. This situation illuminates the complex role royal figures play in addressing military concerns, particularly when one prince's willingness to speak out throws into sharp relief the silence of others, including the king himself as commander of the armed forces. The veteran's gratitude for Harry's intervention, as witnessed throughout the day's interviews, suggests his advocacy work continues to resonate deeply with those who served, regardless of media gatekeeping. Looking ahead, the future of Harry's advocacy for veterans may increasingly depend on alternative platforms and direct engagement, as traditional media channels appear compromised by their institutional loyalties and the desire to avoid narratives that might cast unflattering comparisons between working royals and the outspoken prince who chose a different path.